I am so happy you both are with me today. This is the best Fuck Shit Up Friday ever. What an awesome way to end my week. I'm super happy you're both here. For those of you that are joining us, sorry, I have to like sort of split screen a little bit when I first start the live. So for those of you that are joining us, thank you for being here. It's Friday, which means it's Fuck Shit Up Friday, which is the best day of the year as far as I'm concerned. I'm so happy to have Imani, Gandy, and Jessica Pieklo here with me. So I want to...
Gandy, real quick.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I have this stupid Utah accent that makes me say people's names totally wrong half the time. Jessica has over a decade of experience as a former litigator and is the vice president of law in the courts at Rewire.News. And Imani,
Imani.
Imani, okay, is former attorney and senior legal analyst at Rewire.News, where she runs the column known as the Angry Black Lady Chronicles. And both of you have one of the most bomb-ass podcasts ever called Boom Lawyered, and Boom has an exclamation point after it. And it is like one of my most favorite things ever to listen to when I'm mad.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you.
So it's super entertaining. And I do these Facebook Lives every single week. And this year I decided to bring in people that inspire me to do really awesome and amazing stuff. So thank you both for being here with me today. So usually what I do is ask a couple of questions and then let the people on Facebook chat with us, and I'll tell you what their questions are and all that stuff. So I don't care who starts, but I really want to know why you decided to start Boom Lawyered, your podcast.
Imani, you start.
Well, the year before we decided to start the podcast, I decided that I wanted to do explainers, like to explain specific legal concepts in a way that was geared towards lay people who didn't go to law school, because I find that a lot of times
but I really
legal journalists tend to write for each other as opposed to for people who may not understand the law. Yeah. And so I got it from that show, How I Met Your Mother. That was like, yeah, Boom Lawyered. And so I just called it the Boom Lawyered, written series. And then when we decided we were coming up for podcast names, we just thought, well, that's a really good podcast name because we're kind of trying to do the same things, teach people about the law in a way that is, easy to understand for people who didn't go to law school.
Yeah. And I think, Imani and I have been working together for how many years now? 5, 6, 7 years.
Like 7 or 8, but just specifically with you and me, I think this is our 3rd year.
Yeah, but just in terms of like doing this work kind of generally, and then but really sort of drilling into the legal nerdery. And we would spend so much of our time just going back and forth about these legal concepts or a particular case, or like, oh my God, can you believe what Alliance Defending Freedom is doing now? And so that space became kind of inspiration for us to say, hey, you know what? There's value here. Like we should share this because some of it's funny because we can be ridiculous. But also, like Imani said, I mean, there is a lot of power in keeping the law inaccessible. And we really are trying to break through to that because these are very unique and challenging and frankly dangerous times. And we need to be armed with as much knowledge and power as we can.
I really love what you just said about how there's power in keeping it inaccessible, because I have used your podcast actually in my class when I'm having to explain the courts to my social work students. I'm like, you really need to be clear on what this means. And then I'm like, warning, there's lots of swearing, which is one of my most favorite things about it, because it does make it accessible, right? Like it makes it so that the law is not boring. Like what y'all have done is just, it's incredible. And my students always walk away going, I'm totally adding that to my playlist because that's amazing. So
that's great to hear. That's great to hear. Because that's what we're trying to do, just like, yeah, as Jessica said, trying to keep the law very hoity-toity and very legalistic is a way to keep quote unquote regular people from understanding how their rights are being affected by what's going on in the courts, right? So if you understand what it means when a law has been preliminarily enjoined and then it's going to be litigated on the merits and then there may be a permanent injunction, like those three, preliminary injunction, permanent injunction, on the merits, those are legal terms that all understand, and we just use them without really stopping to think, hey, maybe a layperson doesn't know what that means, so why don't we explain it to them so that they know?
Yes.
So hopefully now all know, you know.
And we live, I mean, even as lawyers and legal analysts and journalists, we are overwhelmed by the amount of information and stories and just stuff happening out there. And so at least, you know, one of the goals is for folks to be able to, you know, say, oh, here's a story that scanned across my, you know, Twitter feed, or, you know, I got a news alert and I have an entry point into it. And that's not overwhelming, because it's easy to shut down in the face of so much constant news, just this barrage of stuff that, like, you know, you got to like deal with your kids and pay bills and like make sure your job is fine. Like, how the hell can you worry about what the Supreme Court is going to do with abortion in Louisiana? Like, you know, but you actually can if you've got the tools for it. And that's one of the things that we hope to do.
And that's really why I started doing Monday Mayhem and Fuck Shit Up Friday on Facebook, because I really wanted to give people like real-time information about how to engage in advocacy on their own terms and like inform them about stuff so it wasn't so overwhelming, so that it's like at their fingertips. So I love that. And I love that you mentioned Twitter, because that's how I found both of you, is on Twitter. And I like regularly, like, you all just inspire me so much. And so I actually, the next question I wanted to ask you all is about, I mean, I know logistically why you engage in journalism and reporting on Twitter. How did you get into reproductive justice reporting, and what was it for each of you that brought the two of you together to do this work together?
It was definitely Twitter that brought us together. It was right around like 2011 when the Tea Party explosion of anti-choice bills started to happen. And I was still in private practice at the time, but sort of in my free time, I was blogging about all of this stuff. And specifically, I recall it was the ultrasound bill in Virginia, like in 2011.
Oh my God, I remember that bill. Holy crap.
Right. So that was the bill. And I remember I had friends in Texas who were like, hey, wait a minute. We've had this bill in Texas for like a year now, and no one's paying attention because Texas is considered flyover country. And like, why do you live in Texas? You should just move. And so that really kind of bothered me, the way in which the media was focusing on abortion rights in some areas, but not, and had sort of given up in other areas. So I just started kind of blogging about it and yelling about it on Twitter. And then I saw Jess she was writing a book at the time, and she was yelling about it on Twitter. She was also a lawyer. And so it was just we just sort of naturally gravitated towards each other. But yeah, I mean, I decided that this was the work that I wanted to do like 8 or 9 years ago. I mean, I was in private practice doing insurance defense work for like 13 years. So for anyone who thinks it's too late to change careers and do something they really want to do, I didn't start doing what I really wanted to do until I was 38.
Nice.
So, I mean, and then just, I mean, having Twitter as a way to connect to people who care about reproductive rights and reproductive justice all over the country, and to get an eye into what it's like for people living in states where those rights are really under siege. Like, I'm in California, like nothing's going on here in California, but being able to talk to people in Texas, being able, you know, there's a friend of mine, Lori Roberts, is in Mississippi, you know, this woman, Mia Raven, who makes awesome jewelry, was in Alabama for a while. I don't know if she still is. And so being able to talk to all of those people, like just regular people who were concerned about the issues, was really inspiring to me. And I thought, you know, I have a way to not just talk about the issues from like an activist perspective, but to really dig in from a legal perspective and hopefully bring something to the conversation about these issues that isn't already there. And so that's sort of what I like about what Jess and I do, is that I think we're the only people that are doing what we're doing. I mean, there are a couple of journalists here and there that do write about abortion rights. But our main focus is this.
Yeah.
And this is what we do. And so I don't know, it's just been a really gratifying experience working at Rewire. Working with Jess for the past 2.5 years has been, you know, the best part of my career. I mean, it's like, I enjoy what I do. What we do is hard and depressing and makes you want to drink sometimes, but having Jess, knowing that she's being like, what the fuck? as I am, it makes me feel less alone, you know, like having someone, and like, even when we're not at work on weekends, we're texting each other, like, did you say blah, blah? It's just nice to have an outlet for that. And then to try to come up with a way together to bring that outrage to the people so that then people can you know, do whatever they want to do from an activist perspective. Like, we're journalists, so we're giving the information, feeding it to you in a way that hopefully you can use to go and do something about it.
Oh, when we use it, believe you me, I only wish you two would have been together when I was the lobbyist for Planned Parenthood in Utah, because I did that job for 6.5 years before I left in 2011. And I would have loved to have you two highlighting all the shenanigans that were happening in Utah back then. Cause it was the Wild West. Like you said, like the Tea Party was losing its mind. Yeah. And that was right when I was there from 2006 until 2011.
Yeah. That's like right in the,
Jess, do you have anything to add to that about how you came into the world of reproductive justice reporting?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like Imani, this is sort of a second or maybe even a third career of mine. I started out in private practice too, and then I sort of transitioned into academics and fell into health law reporting generally because I was one of the few people at the time who actually had to track and follow the Affordable Care Act in every iteration. So, you know, and Republicans did that big dramatic, like, who the hell read all 9,000 pages and dropped it on the table? I was a little offended because my job was to read all of those. I did, you guys. Like, that was me. But so through that process, then people started to say, hey, can you explain this? Because if you can explain the Affordable Care Act to regular folks, then like you actually have a thing that you can do. And so I realized that I can explain insurance and health law. And so I started to do that. And then you know, the timing was just sort of there. Everything exploded. And I had this really weird background of health law and constitutional law, and Republicans zeroed in on abortion rights and contraception and LGBTQ rights from a like biological perspective that was just all messed up. But it was Twitter that introduced me to Imani. And it was lovely because, you know, she gave much of our origin story, but, you know, we started out as, I would say, like colleagues and friends, like women attorneys who found camaraderie in that space, and then mutual, and, you know, some shared and complementary talents. And it's just sort of blossomed from there. It's lovely to have somebody to exist in the space with, because as Imani said, the work is hard, but it doesn't feel like work all the time. I would be pissed off like this always. This is at least a productive like outlet for me. I think but I would be this pissed off regardless if I was like, you know, writing, you know, articles and doing a podcast with Imani and those kinds of things. Like, I'd still be pissed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's essentially the stuff that I was doing for free in this like gray period between private practice and actually Jody hiring me, where I was just like creating this database of legislation because I felt like, why hasn't anyone done this yet? We need to keep track of this stuff. And so now that's the database that our research assassin, Bree Shea, like, you know, she's like, she's heaven sent, you know, and she's just kind of always behind the scenes. We're trying to get her out in front of the scenes a little bit more, but you know, I think she's probably the single person who knows the most about reproductive rights and anti-LGBTQ legislation in the country, hands down. She knows all of it. And so I think that, you know, having that information, having our legal expertise, I think just the three of us, especially, I think we complement each other really well. We have our own skill sets. We work together well without ego. We're not, you know, there's a lot, you know, we're not crabs in a barrel trying to trip over one of each other to climb ahead. You know, we're also women. I think it's nice to have women in this space, to not have to be listening to a bunch of dudes talking about abortion all the time. You know what I mean? Because it's like, yeah, great, fine. Everyone should talk about these issues, but it's, you know, journalism is already such a male-dominated space that it's nice to feel like we are the only legal team of women that are doing this particular thing at this critical moment.
So that kind of is a really nice, I really segue into, with all of the things, I've been getting so many people sending me messages about, I don't understand New York. I don't know what happened in New York. I don't understand how all of a sudden this late term abortion thing is a thing. I actually had to explain this to my class yesterday. My entire social work advocacy class, MSWs in Cal State San Bernardino, had a professor talk about the abortion law, and not in a very nice way. And so they were like, Dr. Bird, what is the deal? And so I had to explain to them what the deal was, which, by the way, mostly I got it from you all. So thanks for being so long. But so what do you wish people knew about what's currently happening, reproductive justice and the law and the courts? Like, what do you wish people understood about what's currently going on right now? And then I actually want to follow up with a question about the journalism, but I want to do that next. So what do you wish people knew about reproductive justice in the courts right now?
Jess?
This is a long game. I mean, so we're chatting right now, and we've got the good feelings of the Louisiana decision and the stay in that, and that's all wonderful. At the same time, yesterday, 46 judicial nominees cleared the Senate Judiciary Committee, along with William Barr's nomination for Attorney General. And I think this is like the 16th or 17th wave of judicial nominees that we've had under the Trump administration. So I really want people to know that the federal courts are not a friendly place for likely a lifetime. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm also not here to comfort in, the face of like, you need to know. So that is one thing I wish that they would know. On sort of the like other peg to that is that there are really good and really exciting things happening in the states. And so it is not the worst thing in the world if we release and let go of our relationship with the federal courts being where we view our like the protector of our federal rights. Like, I mean, I'm in Colorado. I am very excited about what's happening in our state, New Mexico. You mentioned, New York, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around the rhetoric around abortion, and particularly later abortion. But what we're seeing at the states are real efforts to codify Roe and to make these protections real in the states, which is frankly probably something that should have happened a long time ago. So the federal courts are trash, and the states are doing good things. There are some good judges. I don't want to I mean,
there's a couple of good judges, but I don't know. The fact that
there's a whole bunch of really bad ones.
Oh, it's so cringy, yucky. Oh. Imani, do you want to add anything?
I don't really have much to add, just that, yeah, I mean, we are in a long fight. It's going to be a long fight. It's important to not get too discouraged, but to also, as Jess said, like, we are in a crisis. There's no real question or doubt about it. It's frustrating for me, and I know it's frustrating for Jess, because we've been yelling about this crisis that was looming for 7 years.
Yeah.
So now it's like, we told y'all, you know what I mean? So now it's more like damage control. What are people willing to do now that these rights are under siege? And just from a non-legal, non-journalistic perspective, I did a South by Southwest panel last year where I asked the question, if abortion were made illegal tomorrow, would you be willing to break the law in order to get an abortion or to help a friend? And I think that's a question that really people should start to answer for themselves now, because that's a real possibility. It's a real possibility that reproductive rights activists may become outlaws in some sense. And, whether or not you're willing to do that, how far you're willing to go, whether or not you're willing to open up your home for people who need to come to a state that's more friendly to their rights. Like, these are simple things that you can do, especially if you feel like, you don't have the time to sit around and read a bunch of shit from the Supreme Court, but you want to help. There are things that you can do that don't take a lot of time, and that can be really helpful to people who are in need. So
absolutely. I actually just had someone say, my friend Tiffany just said, and then there's Utah, women don't count in the eyes of government here. And what's really,
I mean, that definition of female boggled my mind. Like, the female, first of all, who has reproductive organs on the outside that are women?
Listen, not only like all of that, but they have so many infertility issues in Utah. Like, honest to shit, the number of women who are infertile in Utah is unbelievable, who've had hysterectomies. Like, I'm telling you, that bill was so fucking horrifying to me. And it was horrifying because I was like, I just left 8 years ago. In 8 years, you all have gone to this level of insanity. It's ridiculous. But I love what you said about people thinking about how will you help your friends get an abortion if they need one? And like, what role are you going to play in this? Because my husband and I are talking about starting an aquaculture farm eventually, because he's a marine biologist. He does all that saving the oceans thing that I don't understand. I'm like, I'll do all the reproductive justice work. You save the ocean. That's cool. We were talking about that, and I was like, he's like, we need to grow kelp. And I was great. I said, great. I'd like to grow laminaria. And he's like, and I'm like, because we're going to need it. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm all, just trust me, our only kelp is going to be laminaria. And
That's really funny.
That's amazing.
I'm like, we're going to supply everybody with the laminaria.
Like a sustainable abortion kelp farm. I love this. Where do I sign up?
And then I'm going to have a tiny village where everyone can come and recuperate. It's going to be perfect. It's so
right, and I'm going to have like a satellite dog sanctuary, because that's really my goal, is to have a dog sanctuary / abortion clinic / recuperation / commune.
Oh my God, y'all. I'm telling you, we're going to be off the hook. It's going to be amazing. So there's nothing more Oregon than a tiny home village.
That is very true.
It's true. So I think we may have covered this a little bit, but we've got about 8 minutes left. So what is the one way, each of you, I'd love for you to answer this. So what is the one way you think others can engage in their communities right now?
Oh boy. I mean, besides just, there's ways to understand what's being passed. I'm like very focused on legislation. That's sort of how that's how I got my in. And so I think, just reading, go to our website, go to Rewire.News, look at the legislative tracker, pick your state, and just read what's going on, because I think you'll be surprised at the amount of fuckery that's going on in your backyard that you don't even know about, right? Like, if Bree hadn't brought that Utah bill to my attention, I don't think anyone in the country would have known it had happened. Like,
no, nobody would have known.
Down the Utah legislative website because so many people were looking at this bill. So just information is power, and interconnect. Like, I'm super into online communities. Like, that's why I love Twitter. It's basically a global online community. Yeah. And so I'm really into connecting with people from different areas and sharing knowledge and sharing ways to fight back against this incursion on our rights. So, honestly,
I'll put that link that you mentioned too in the comments so that people can see it.
Yeah. Just, spread the good word, talk to people. Don't be afraid to talk about abortion with your friends. Abortion's not a dirty word. You should be able to talk about it. You should be able to, if you have friends who maybe think that, oh, well, it's really sad that, the pregnant people are giving birth to fetuses and then murdering them. Like, if you have a friend that thinks that, sit them down and be like, okay, here's what later abortion is, and here's why what you're saying is bananas. Try to strip away some of the falsehoods and the stigma and the whatnot. Even those little steps will increase knowledge about abortion care and increase the sort of it should just be, it should just be. Why are we even having this conversation? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really appreciate the justice model framework for meeting people where they are at, because not only do I think it's really the only model that works, frankly, but also it's a safe model for a person if you are not sure how to engage in, let's say, abortion rights advocacy or, LGBTQ rights advocacy, like wherever you may feel some discomfort, but an impulse to want to do things, the justice model serves really well. And so that's kind of what I try to fall back on, in that sense of meeting people where they're at. And I appreciate that can be really hard. One of the examples that, I grew up in Nebraska, so the conservative Bible Belt space is one that flows through my veins because it's what I know, being born and raised there. And so, thinking of that as a space, an example of a place that may be fraught, but people may want to engage in. When in the past, I've spoken to students or things like that, an example of meeting people where they're at in a justice space there would be, I tend to talk about miscarriage management and investigating folks like Purvi Patel. For example, I did a talk one time at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville and did a real quick, study. How many of you folks who are here, it was a communications class, how many folks of you here come from a background where you had comprehensive sex ed? And I'd say maybe a quarter at most of the students raised their hands. So that gave me a sense of what we're working with there, and in the ability to sort of talk to them and say, well, let me tell you a story about a woman, and this is what the state did. The state came in and did that. Now, would you appreciate that for your preacher's wife or, folks, because in that space, people are experiencing miscarriage a lot. So that's a tangible example that I try to to pull, but everything Imani said about just information is power, and you know, our mission is exactly it. I mean, arm yourself with as much of that as possible, and then engage as you can where it's safe and comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, I did an event, I do Facebook Lives once a month with a conservative friend of mine here in Oregon. And she's like the conservative yin to my liberal yang, right? And we do these Facebook Lives together. And one of the things, we did an actual live event with 30 women, most of whom we didn't know. They've been following our Facebook Lives on Facebook. And they were asking for news sources that they didn't consider to be polarizing, right? So some of them I actually suggested Rewire.News, and they were like, ugh. It's like for some of them that it made them really uncomfortable, right? Speaking of approaching people where they're at. Are there any lists or things that we can give to people, that resources that we can give to people to help them find news that helps them be informed, that's not all or nothing? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, are there lists somewhere? Is there a good space to drive them towards?
I mean, I think that any space that I would say a conservative would probably say, oh, that's liberal bias. You know what I mean? So like, I truly believe that Rewire.News is very fact-based journalism. We don't publish nonsense. We don't publish our, thoughts and prayers. We publish science. We publish law. We publish facts. We have reporters that report facts. That said, people still look at us as being like part of big abortion. You know what I mean? So there's really, I think it's hard to find sources for people who are looking for maybe a different opinion if the first instinct is to say, well, that source already has a bias. I really can't think of anything where, because we're the only publication that focuses exclusively on this. I mean, there are other spaces that will publish pieces here and there about it, but we're kind of the lodestar. So and
I feel like it's all fact-based information, but I think you're right. I think it's, one of my friends, Mike, is suggesting health journals, but sure, if you have access to those things, because that's the problem, right?
They link to Rewire.News all the time.
They do link to Rewire.News all the time. It's totally true.
I mean, I appreciate it. But I think Imani's point is right, because it's one thing to say, like, is there a space, and, and health journals are great. Like Kaiser, for example, wonderful, like great information. You read their articles, they will bring you back to us because we are reporting evidence-based stuff. Now, does that mean that we are willing to compromise on something like the idea that abortion is a fundamental human right? No, like that is a part of our mission. So you won't get space that is squishy there for that. So I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting. I kind of wanted to see what your take was on that. Okay. And the last question I have for you all, oh my God, I can't even believe I'm interviewing you both. I'm just dying. What is one thing that is fanning your flame and lighting you on fire right now?
I am loving this new congressional class that's coming in, these women. And so like that in terms of the political landscape, I'm also really jazzed about my Rocky Mountain West, as I mentioned earlier, like Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah. There's good stuff percolating in this area of the country. And I would say watch for it, because we are really poised to lead. So that, and we are getting closer to the Women's World Cup. So I'm always going to put a plug in for women's soccer when I can.
Of course you are.
I would have to say I'm really jazzed about the fact that Stacey Abrams used the word reproductive justice in her State of the Union rebuttal. Like the fact that in 2016 we were trying to clamor to get, Hillary Clinton to talk about Hyde and talk about repealing Hyde, and then here we are. And I've been working with Black women and reproductive justice activists and advocates to learn from them about how to make reproductive justice more mainstream without stripping it away of its roots, right? Without whitening reproductive justice, right? To make sure it centers on the people it's supposed to be centered. And the fact that a Black woman was like on national TV, on primetime, after the jackass's speech, talking about reproductive justice, I was just like, whoa, that's such a huge deal for me, because then now that means that people who may not have ever thought about RJ are going to be like, what the hell is that? Like, what does that mean? And it also means that there are people who may be on the fence about abortion, who may be sort of leaning towards that anti-choice side, to recognize that RJ isn't just about terminating pregnancies, right? It's about being able to parent the kids that you have. And so I think there is room for, sort of working with people. I'm not going to say working with anti-choicers necessarily, but working with people who may not be wholly on board for like abortion forever, now and always, but like who want to work on making things better for pregnant people, for people to raise their kids. So I'm excited about more people learning about RJ and realizing that it's more than just abortion. It's family, it's community, you know what I mean?
I'm really excited about, someone just commented that we almost need to reband reproductive health to gain a better nonpartisan following. And my response to that is always, reproductive justice is not just about reproductive health. It is about making sure that we're looking at the entire environment in which a person resides and helping them parent when they want to parent and when they're ready to parent, and making sure that their environment is safe so they can raise those children in a safe space. And also really highlighting the work of Sister Song and all the other organizations that are doing actual reproductive justice work. Because I was thrilled when I saw that. I actually saw that on your Twitter feed, Imani, where I was like, oh my God, she said reproductive justice, because I couldn't watch her speech right at the moment. So I was like, oh my God, that's amazing, So.
And it stems from all the work, like you said, that these amazing Black women have done, have started, especially at Sister Song, Monica Simpson, Loretta Ross, those folks. And so it's good to see that their hard work is paying off. And also, in terms of the question that you asked before about what people can do, reproductive justice is an umbrella that encompasses so much. So if you're out there marching for Black Lives Matter, you're doing RJ, right? Because if a Black woman can't have a child, or a white woman or whomever can't have a Black child and raise that Black child without fearing that Black child's going to be gunned down in the streets, that's a reproductive justice issue. Environmental racism, Flint water is a reproductive justice issue. So really, pick an issue, pick a liberal issue, and be like, yeah, I'm in on this RJ shit, because that's the way forward. It's the human rights framework that I think best works for everyone.
Well, it does, because it allows space for people who don't want to choose abortion for themselves, to choose adoption. And I will put a link in the comments about Sister Song, so that people can go and discover Sister Song and look at the work that they're doing. Because, those of us that have been doing this work forever are like, oh yeah, reproductive justice, we know what that means. But so many people don't understand the difference. And I don't want it to be co-opted again by the white people, because
that's not going to happen. Not on my watch.
No, I know it's not going to happen, but I really want people to understand the history of reproductive justice, so they don't just think it's a code word, right? Like it's something fun to say in the progressive movement in 2019. You know what I mean? So, thank you so much for being here with us. I'm going to ask you to just hang on so I can talk to you a little bit after we're not live anymore, but I have to do my little shtick. So thank you all for being here today. For more information about my new Fanning the Flames online social justice training, 5 modules, 5 videos, yours all the time, in perpetuity forever, go to birdgirlindustries.com. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at birdgirl1001. Thank you so much for being here. Imani, Jess, oh my God. I'm just so grateful that you are both in my world, and I just appreciate you immensely.
Thank you so much.
Same. This was lovely. Thank you so much.
Bye.